Namaskar, Nileshok here. My greetings to all of you on this auspicious day of Mahashivratri. Mahadev, Jai Jai Shiva Shambho. This morning I was reading Bhagavad Gita, actually Gitai by Vinoba. And my usual practice is to read either a one specific adhyay or just randomly open the book and start anywhere. When I follow the second method, which is randomly opening and start reading whatever pops up, and then to meditate on this. And the specific verses, now I forgot which one they were, but that led me to the meditation, contemplation, you can say, thinking, what if Arjun had asked Krishna the question, if at all there is somebody with no Shraddha, what would be the outcome? And I realized that Arjun has not asked such a question, but it would be an interesting question or interesting to think of what would follow. But frankly, even when we have Shraddha, but we don't follow the method and we don't follow a specific subject, which is to say, we don't follow the method to get rid of our samshaya, get rid of our doubt, or to find out what we are looking for. Or the second aspect is we have Shraddha, but we don't have focus. And therefore, our efforts could be split in multiple directions, and therefore, we do not achieve the specific objective we have set it for ourselves. So, in this context, I would like to share some of my thoughts. And the framework that I am going to share with you is not new at all. That's something I have shared through multiple talks of mine. But just let's jump into that. Okay, in the context of we have a Shraddha, but then we are missing the other ingredients. And at the end, I want to ask the question, I don't know all the answers, but what if the Shraddha is not there? Even when Shraddha is there and other pieces are missing, we still have a very delicate situation. So I will leave it open to you to think what would be the outcome, with, of course, my 2 cents. If the Shraddha itself doesn't exist, what a disaster it can be, or it is, because we do have examples from our time. Okay, so let's jump into the screen. So what if one does not have Shraddha? Okay, that's the question I ask myself, in the sense, did Arjun ask this question to Krishna? And actually the answer is no. In fact, so that means, at least in the context of Arjun and Krishna, 7,500 years ago, that was given. I mean, everyone understood that you have to have Shraddha, a trust in something. Otherwise, any action becomes impossible. For example, you would hesitate to take the next step because you don't know if the ground where you are going to place your feet, if it's going to be stable. So you have that trust that the ground is going to be stable. If you are breathing, the next breathing in, if you don't have a Shraddha that the air that you're going to breathe in is clean, then you don't know what to do. So these are just some very basic examples what we are seeing. So if I see a scene just out of the window that I'm looking at right now, actually a beautiful scene, a few buildings but a lot of greenery, very bright morning of Mahashivratri day, because Shivaratri being at night, of course. But if I don't trust what my eyes are showing me, and that happens, that happens to us when we are looking through the microscope or when we are looking into a laughing mirror. So these are just some basic examples that unknowingly we actually are exercising Shraddha. We have a Shraddha. And therefore, I think it's natural that Arjun did not ask this question to Krishna. But in our times, as I get into the different areas of research, I realize when I get these questions, sometime from folks in general, but other times other researchers in the same field, other times trolls making some vague comments, and I wonder exactly what is wrong with that specific situation. And in that context, again, I had this question: what if somebody does not have a Shraddha in what you have done, Shraddha in the basic methodology that one is using, like say I am using, okay, Shraddha in the focus of the research. For example, again, I'll continue to use these old examples, like when did Mahabharata war happen? And somebody may say, well, I don't care when it happened. And that's perfectly fine. It's just that therefore the person will not able to understand the excitement, the enthusiasm, or any research related to it. Or what if somebody doesn't have a Shraddha in the basic source material that we are using? For example, in dating Mahabharata, the primary text is Mahabharata text itself. What if somebody doesn't have a Shraddha that the content of the text is coming to us from the time of Mahabharata? Or if it is Ramayana, what if somebody does not have a Shraddha that the content of Valmiki Ramayana that we are holding in our hands is coming from the time of Ramayana? Then frankly, all bets are off. But even if we have a Shraddha, let us look at some of the challenges we can face if we don't do other things right. And what are those other things? I'm going to look at three aspects: the karma shakti, the jnana trupti, and phala prapti. Okay, if we have to translate loosely and only crudely and in a loose fashion, I would call this a conviction. The conviction leads to action, therefore that karma shakti, which is, we may translate it as a Shraddha, or rather I'm saying Shraddha translated loosely as a conviction. Then the jnana trupti, which is what? Which is eliminating the samshay. Okay, and how do we do that? Arthantar. If there are two opinions about something, or if there are two convictions about something, now both may come from a different, from a Shraddha perspective, and we will see why even two individuals coming from a Shraddha and still they can come up with two different answers. What can cause such a thing? We will also look at that. Bhagavad Gita answers this beautifully. So to eliminate the gap between the two, which is to decide if both of them are wrong or if one of them is correct, and if it is correct, which one is correct, or at least at a minimum to decide which one of the two choices are better, which one is the better than the other. We have to use this method, what I call DCM, the doubt clearing machine, which is the logic of scientific method, or what Nyaya Darshana calls Panchavaya Avayavaha. Okay. And then the curiosity, which is again a basic ingredient, and that truly allows you, along with the Shraddha, to stick with a certain objective, stick with certain goal for a very long time without wavering, even when you face obstacles after obstacles and when you face failures after failures. So if we put these three things together, again Shraddha, Samshaya and Jitnyasa as a matrix, okay, we can draw this on our different axes, like three axes. Okay, one is, think of this as an axis of a Samshaya. Okay, now it can be a Samshaya of a mind, or it can be Samshaya of a buddhi. Okay, we'll just stay with that right now. If this Samshaya is eliminated, it leads to Jnana Trupti, because in the presence of a samshaya, presence of a doubt, we are confused as to what is the truth, or which one of the two is a better solution, better option, better explanation, whatever that you are dealing with. Then let's put the y-axis of a Shraddha, or loosely translated as conviction, And this leads to that karma shakti. This leads to the action. Okay. And now Shraddha can be either tamasi or sattvic. Now there is one rajasi in between too, but just as the extremes of the axis, I'm taking tamasi Shraddha at the bottom and sattvic Shraddha at the top. Now this is important to keep in mind. Just on the previous page I mentioned that two individuals may have a Shraddha, okay, and they go on solving the same problem but come up with two different answers. Now, of course, one possibility is that they both could be wrong, but let's just say if we know that one of them is right, or even if we don't know, and we have to simply decide which one of the two has done a better job, or which one of the two answers appear to be at least directionally closer to the ultimate truth. But the question is, why did we have two different answers if both of them have Shraddha? And that is the question that Arjun asked Krishna, and Krishna gave a beautiful answer. That is the entire 17th Adhyay of Bhagavad Gita. But back to Shraddha. So it can move from Tamasi to Sattvic, and of course that leads to Karma Shakti. We have discussed this. If a Shraddha is a Sattvic, in a very crude way, we can say the person can end up creating a lot of useful things for individual, oneself, for the family, for the country, for society, and so on. If the Shraddha is Tamasic, still, if there is a lot of that tamasic Shraddha, it does lead to a karma shakti, but the nature of that karma, the nature of the outcome of that karma is destructive in nature, such as say terrorism, okay, such as just creating utpat, such as just say trolls. Okay, now of course the trolls contribute in some way. Okay, so that we can say with the wars also, like the Second World War led to development of lot of technology, so some good came out of it, but still we would not say the wars are desired. Same thing with a terrorism or a tamasic Shraddha. Okay, so that leads to karma shakti. Whether it is sattvic or tamasic, it does lead to karma shakti, and therefore it's very important that we have to look at the other dimensions, such as the dimension of samshay, but also a dimension of jidnyasa. And the jidnyasa, the limits of it are kutuhala, simply means mere curiosity, and our society is full of them. But look where I have written kutuhala. At is towards that 0 point, okay, close to tamas and close to the samshaya of a mind. The samshaya of a mind simply says, well, I don't think this is possible. The tamasi Shraddha leads to Karya Shakti, but of a destructive kind. And a jidnyasa, which is mere curiosity, as in kutuhal, basically it creates, this individual creates a nuisance for others by simply asking them to do something, whereas he or she himself don't do a thing. And in most cases, there are exceptions, their curiosities, their kutuhala is of a useless kind. And why does that happen? Again, remember, typically these tamasi, kutuhala, and samshaya of a mind come together. They reside in the same brain, okay, and more or less the same mind, we can say. So let's complete our cube here. If jidnyasa, the other side is a saprayojan, which means there is a very specific goal, but the goal has an altruistic side attached to it. There is a good purpose associated with it, and when such a objective is achieved, actually it leads to, of course, the growth of knowledge, in that sense jnana trupti. It leads to many good things that are useful for the society, and the objective, what is achieved itself, is a significant leap of progress, whichever way you want to look at it, in the physical sense, in the mental sense, in the intellectual sense, into the phalaprapti, the objective that is achieved. So let's complete this cube. At the bottom left hand corner, if that combination or any one of them comes together, basically it is a destructive type of outcome, vinasha. Whether it's simply tamasic Shraddha, whether it is simply a mere curiosity on a jidnyasa axis, or it is a simple doubt of the mind, okay, it leads to destruction. Okay, think of trolls in general, think of my trolls. okay, and just look at what they do. It will provide you a good baseline as to how that behavior looks like. The exactly opposite of it, diagonally opposite, at the top right hand corner there is Abhyudaya. Just like Vaisheshika says, Yato Abhyudaya Nishreyasa Siddhi Sadharma. And so Abhyudaya Nishreyas, there is no difference. Abhyudaya could be in a very crude sense seen as the prosperity in a material sense, but Nishreyasa can be seen actually as Abhyudaya, a prosperity in the sense of the development of mind in a sattvic fashion and a development of an intellect, jnana, okay, and that's how it leads us to the freedom, and that's what we are calling mukti. Anyways, okay, so that's the axis. Now keep this cube in your mind as we look at some of the shlok from Bhagavad Gita. This is our doubt clearing machine that I referred to. The left side is the tough problem to solve. You can think of this as a doubt. It is something like we are looking for an answer to some phenomenon that appears mysterious to us because we don't know the answer. Or it could be a certain problem for which multiple people have provided solutions, and we are not sure which one of them is a better solution, which one of them or which many of them are wrong solutions, why they are wrong. Our objective could be anything, but that's how broadly we are defining this as a tough problem to solve. And then to solve this, we must able to state very precisely and crisply and specifically these 5 things. What is my hypothesis? What is my theory? And once you put forward a theory, it immediately decides, it immediately puts constraints on what's going to be the evidence. There is a famous quote of Albert Einstein. He says, it is the theory that decides what can be observed, and that is that evidence. Once we have the evidence, we have to find a way to objectively test it, validate it, or falsify it. And that's when the Tantra Yukti comes into picture. What kind of technology, what kind of instruments you are going to use, and so that's what everything about objective testing. And then we draw a inference based on that evidence. In the process, look at the bottom. In the process, there is a lot of background knowledge that we take it for granted, and that's where again Shraddha comes in the picture. For example, if we are sending a spaceship, okay, into the space or sending it to the moon, we have to have a trust in the laws of Newton. Okay, I mean, I'm just saying in a very simplified fashion. Otherwise, we have to assume that the same laws exist here, same laws exist in between Earth and the moon, and of course on the moon too, accordingly adjusted, to the local conditions such as the climatic condition or the extent of gravity on the moon and so on and so forth. But we have a Shraddha. We have to have a Shraddha, otherwise this thing cannot work. Okay, that's why Shraddha is like very prime. It is assumed, and so therefore it's very interesting when people talk of eradicating Shraddha or make fun of Shraddha. Okay, even making fun of Shraddha, they are having Shraddha in many things. But again, I'll not digress on the subject. And if you are lucky, you end up getting the solution. Now, 2 shlok that I want to bring it out just for your awareness are from the 4th adhyay of Bhagavad Gita. The one is number 34. Tadvidi pranipatena. Many of you would actually know this. Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattva darshina. Now here the tadvidhi literally means know, understand. Okay, but just for our discussion, just to do the apple to apple kind of a comparison there, I'm going to say, just imagine for a minute, and it's not any stretch of imagination. Of course, some of the what you say, I'm looking for a right word, right, and a polite word. Okay, some of the snobby Sanskrit Vyakarankar will have like seizures and fits, but say tad vidhi. Just for a minute, think of this as tad vidhi. Okay, and actually, if you go back to this 4th chapter and verses before 34, this is about the Vikarma Yoga. And you will see, going from a physical action, now we are looking at our mental disposition behind those actions. That's what this chapter is about. In fact, it's chapter 3 is karma, chapter 4 is vikarma, and chapter 5th is akarma. Think of it like that. So vidhi is to know, understand that the proper way of pranipatena, pariprashnena, how to ask proper questions, okay, how to be respectful, which is again has an element of shraddha and so on. But if you take vidhi, instead of vidhi, say vidhi. And so then think of this as a method, or having a proper knowledge as to what to follow, what to use, the tantra yukti, the tarka shastra, the vijnana buddhi, and so on. So there are these three elements, like tad vidhi, if we take it as a vidhi, then pranipatena, which is the element of a shraddha, and pariprashnena, you can think of this as an element of a jitnyasa or a curiosity, and in some sense the opposite of that or closely related is a samshaya. And so what it is said there is tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam dhyaninas tattvadarshina. Maybe guys take this as a Bhagavad Gita, or rather Marathi 101 exercise. So for example, I'm going to read from Gita because I have it right here next to me in my hand. So there Vinobaji translates this: Seva karuni te jana namra bhave pusuniya jnanopadesha detil jnani anubhavi tuja. Okay, so that pranipatena has that element of shraddha. Then pariprashnena, now Vinoba translates it very well, namra bhave pusuniya. There has to, why are you asking a question? Question is good, samshaya is also good. But in what context? Are you asking that question to challenge the individual, or are you asking the question because you don't know the answer? Because if you do know the answer, tell what the answer is, and if the person has a different answer, now this is an interesting thing for doing a samvada, vada in the sense of nyaya and so on. Now the next shlok, that is 4.40 from the same chapter, it's adnyasya ashraddha dhanasya samshayatma vinashyati nayam lokosti na paro na sukham samshayatmana. Therefore I ask you for a second to turn that vidhi, like to know, and therefore adnyasya means of course the one who doesn't know, and so they are exactly counter. But if you take that as a vidhi, as a method, then the adnyasya, I'm going to translate that in the specific context below as the person who does not know the proper method. Okay, and then of course the person doesn't have a shraddha, and person is a full of samshaya. Now remember, at the bottom diagram I said samshaya is of a two kinds: samshaya of a mind, which says I don't believe this is true, and the other samshaya is this is interesting, that's amazing, we don't know the answer, why would somebody say like this, or why would such a thing has been described by somebody else, could this be true, and how can we figure this out if it is true? That is the samshaya of a buddhi. But the samshaya that is referred to by Bhagwan Krishna in the Adhyaya 4 and Shlok 40 is the samshaya of a mind. Therefore, actually it's saying vinashyati. So, adnyasya ashraddha dhanasya samshayatma vinashyati. And the Vinoba's translation is very beautiful. Nase jnana, nase shraddha, samshayi nasalapura, naha loka, nato loka, na pave, sukha samshayi. Because the samshaya of a buddhi is actually amazing. It can lead to growth of knowledge if one acts on it. Just having a samshaya is not sufficient, even of a buddhi. But if some takes the route of a jidnyasa, some uses the karma shakti through the medium of a shraddha, follows the method to eliminate that samshaya, that follows the proper method. And we'll look at why the proper method must be followed. So anyway, so these shlok are very much connected, directly connected with this cube that I am showing. Some of the people have asked me this, like how I develop these frameworks, and I will tell you there is nothing of mine in it really. It is, I meditate, I contemplate on this shloka, and then I say, if I have to explain this to someone, what would I do? What picture comes in front of me? What kind of upaman I can think of? Or if I have to visually present this as a diagram, as a process flow, or as some shape, how would I do it? And that's how you can say inspiration, it comes to me. Okay, now in this context we are going to stay with this cube. So you looked at the three dimensions, like when they are followed, you actually get the knowledge. If you don't follow this, adnyasya, ashraddha, dhanasya, samshayatma, negative, negative, negative on all three counts, then actually it leads to a destruction. Okay, vinashyati, vinasha. Okay, that is that bottom triangle of the cube that we are referring to. Now somebody, well, let me not digress, because I was going to say, somebody may say, well, the person has a tamasi shraddha. Yeah, true. And what happens? I'll just mention what Krishna says. You can read the 18th chapter of 18th Adhyaya of Bhagavad Gita. He says somebody has a shraddha, or let's say somebody has a buddhi, okay, but the buddhi is of a tamasi kind. Then what happens? Krishna says, adharmyam dharmyam itiya manyate tamasavruta sarvarthan viparitamscha buddhi sa partha tamasi. If somebody's buddhi is tamasi, and what happens if the shraddha is tamasi? You can read the entire 17th chapter with different aspects. Okay, but if the 18th chapter, if the buddhi is tamasi, the person, something that is a dharmic act, he or she thinks it is a adharmic act, and vice versa. And when one has to look at a answer, okay, a existing answer, or one has to look at the method, the person uses the method exactly the opposite way than it is intended. The person actually, when the answer is given, the person understands, or you can say misunderstands the answer 180-degree opposite fashion. That is a trademark of a tamasi buddhi. But back to our cube here. Another shlok or couple of shlok I am pulling they are from the 6th chapter, which is a dhyana yoga, and that has to do with what? That has to do with a jidnyasa. Because you may be curious, but all of us are curious about many things, but if we are not focused, then we are not going to achieve anything. Even when we are focused, we may not achieve our objective. And in that context, actually, Arjun is asking this question to Krishna. He says, Ayati Shraddha Yopeto Yoga Chalita Manasa Aprapya Yoga Samsiddhi Ka Gati Krishna Gachati. So somebody has a Shraddha, okay, that is fine. But the person is making efforts, but what if he is not successful? And that can happen. Vinoba translates this as Shraddha ahe nave yatna. That yatna is the word, that's where the word yati also comes from. Okay, the person who has done a great tapasya and therefore has achieved something. Okay, Shraddha ahe nave yatna yoga tuni chalunizo. So therefore, somewhere the person digressed, person deflected, couldn't keep the focus, and couldn't use, maybe, for that reasons could be many. Again, 18, I don't want to digress again, 18 chapter it says, okay, so adhishtanam tatha karta karanam cha prathak vidam vividhascha prathak cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam. There are 5 reasons why we do a certain purpose, why we succeed or why we fail. Maybe all these 5 things are not available in sufficient quantity. Daivam chaivatra panchamam, that there are many other forces beyond our control, but in a way required to achieve the objective. If they are not present in the right way, we may not achieve our objective. Ourselves, we may not have the ability ourselves to achieve certain thing. That is adhishtanam, but tatha karta, our objective may not be pragmatic. Again, Nyaya Darshana discusses this beautifully. Okay, so Shakya Prapti, one of the element, we talked about Panchavaya Avayava, but there are actually Dasha Avayava too. And one of the element that is discussed is Shakya Prapti. Have you taken a problem with a success in mind? Before even you begin, do you feel reasonably confident of achieving the success? If you don't, then you should not take such a problem to solve. Okay, this is a guy's viveka buddhi, this is a common sense. But many times when people send me all kinds of things and says, Nileshji, I'm working on this thing, what are your thoughts? And sometimes, of course, they are working on a great problem, very pragmatic one, and I say, great, kudos, best wishes. Other times I don't know what to say. I mean, I personally really feel for such a person, but they are not in the mood to listen. So I say, go ahead, best wishes, and then After 5 years and 10 years, I hear from them or I don't hear from them, and they have not achieved anything on that specific problem they were working on. So here Vinoba's translation for verse 37 is Shraddha ahe nave yatna yoga tuni chalunizo mukala yoga siddhisa jaya konya gati sato. And Arjun is continuing his question. He says Kayato, the second verse, Kayato ubaya bhrashta brahma margi buluniya nasha pave niradhara futalelya dagapari. The ubaya marga in the sense of a Sankhya and a yoga, okay, or Jnana yoga and Karma yoga, Jnana yoga versus Karma yoga, if you want to see this as a split two different areas, okay, what happens? And of course Krishna goes on to give the answer. I'm not going to go there, but the point I wanted to bring is the specific question Krishna is asking is, Arjun is asking is that Shraddha is there, so Karma Shakti is there, okay, but what if the person doesn't end up, achieving that objective, that phala prapti? What happens? So for example, like when I started working on this Arundhati Vasishta observation and to figure it out if Arundhati indeed went ahead of Vasishta, and if it did, when did that happen? And it took me 15 years. My point is, what if I would have even continued for another 50, which would come to the time now, and I had not still figured out if Arundhati went ahead of Vasishta, and that it went ahead of Vasishta, or it could be seen walking ahead of Vasishta only during this time interval, what I call epoch of Arundhati, from 10,248 BC through 4636 BC. What could be my situation? I mean, was this all West? From 1994 to 2025. And actually Krishna is saying, and I'm not going to go into that answer, I would encourage everyone to read chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita all the way to the end, and you can see Krishna's answer. But my quick answer in a very pragmatic sense here, the kind of things that I am researching for last 30 years, is that even when you don't get to your objective, that particular objective, particular problem you are trying to solve, such as say Arundhati, did it walk ahead of Vasishta, and if it did, when, and so on, and why? Okay, we also want to know, if we can, why. Always we may not get all the three answers. I can tell you with a confidence, guys, that even if I wouldn't have solved this problem, in the process I did, and I would have solved many other very critical, very important problems. And in a way, Krishna is giving a similar answer, and Krishna's answer is slightly different in the sense he says, hey, the point at which you stop in the same life or in the next life, you pick it up from there. In my case, I would say answer is slightly different in the specific context we are talking, that even when you don't reach the objective you have set to achieve, you will end up having a phala prapti in 10 different areas that you have not even thought about. So that's why I wanted to bring this particular shloka. Okay, now let's look at the other dimension, which is the elimination of a samshay. And therefore I showed you that doubt clearing machine, the logic of scientific method, or what Nyaya Darshana would call pancha avayava. As a Pararthanuman, when you are explaining what you have done and how you eliminated your doubt, and frankly, you doing it yourself, like as a Swarthanuman, trying to reach that conclusion, you are using, or you must be using, this Panchavaya Avayava method, the logic of scientific method. Sometimes people ask the question, so what method did you use? And I sometimes give a chuckle, other times I laugh, whatever that is. I say, what do you mean? There is only one method. And that is this logic of scientific method, or Panchavaya Avayava. There are minimum, this is a minimum requirement of these 5 elements that you must show if you have claimed that you have done something novel, something interesting, something innovative, something revolutionary. So the samshaya and elimination of samshaya, these are again 2 elements into this dasha avayava method. Okay, one is a samshay and the other one is a samshaya vyudasa. Did you eliminate the samshay? And that gap is done through this doubt clearing method, which is the method of science, and that is explained through that 5 elements, that pancha avayava. So this other set of shloks that I want to pull out here are from 16th adhyay, and the last two shloka there. Yash shastra vidi mustrujya vartate kamakarata nasa siddhi mavapnoti na sukham na paragatim. And now the next one is also very important. Tasmat shastram pramanamte karya karya vyavastito. I will read Vinobaji's translation, but I will also give my crude but pragmatic, practical translation in this context. So, for example, Shlok 23, Vinobaji's translation is Zo Shastra Marga Soduni, the method. Think of this as a method for our simplistic purposes. जो शास्त्र मार्ग सोडूनी करीतो स्वैरवर्तन न सिद्धी लाभते त्यास नवा सुखन सद्गती. आणि द नेक्स्ट वन म्हणूनी आदरी शास्त्र देअरफॉर वी हॅव टू रिस्पेक्ट द मेथड कार्याकार्य कळावया शास्त्रांचे वाक्य जाणूनी इथे तू कर्म आचरी. कार्या अकार्य. Okay, what is the right action, what is the wrong actions? In a simple language, I'm going to say, when you are using the DCM, doubt clearing machine, the do's and the don'ts. The do's are given practically in the first 3 to 4 chapters of Nyaya Darshana. And then the latter portion, some portion of chapter 4 and in the chapter 5th, Nigraha Sthana and so on, it covers the things that you don't want to do, the don'ts, okay, which is what? Jalpa, Vitanda, Hetva, Bhasa, Chala. And if you do any of this, then basically it leads to a Nigrasthana, which means a defeat. Now, the person who does it, like my trolls, they don't recognize it, but a person who has understood a Nyaya Darshana, or person who has a basic scientific acumen, logical reasoning skills, and understands Tantra Yukti, understands empiricism, understand objective testing, very easily understand how they are doing a nuisance, how they are quickly at a drop of a hat jumping into Jalpa, Vitanda, Hetva, Bhasa, Chala, and so on. Okay, so this is this second one, which has directly connection with using the right method, and the method is the doubt clearing machine, Panchavaya Avayava, or the logic of scientific discovery, scientific method. Okay, so that's what I'm showing this again on the two sides of it. Actually, the one I'm showing on the left, like from the 6th chapter, they do not apply to Shraddha per se. Actually, they apply to the Jidnyasa axis, but I don't know on a 2-dimensional screen how to show that 3-dimensional Jidnyasa axis and put that shlok there. Okay, so forgive me. All right, now what happens is this, again those 3 axes, if we look at the Samshaya, this is like, you can say that the person don't want the bhakti, okay, don't want to have a Shraddha, and therefore there is a Samshaya, okay, and therefore the person lacks Shakti, therefore they don't reach their objective, therefore they don't get the proper knowledge. Even when somebody is presenting a proper knowledge to them, they fail to comprehend it. Okay, you can say the comprehension ability, comprehension power, comprehension Shakti is not there because of a lack of bhakti or Shraddha. Okay, now if you look at the other axis, now remember I used the word Shraddha there, therefore I did not want to use the word Shraddha, and therefore I used the word Bhakti for a reason, but they are connected. Now I said Shraddha leads to Karma Shakti, right? The conviction that leads to action. Okay, now what happens here again is the person wants the purity. Okay, because like, you know, taking a shower in a simple way, that will make us feel clean, like a Shuddha, let's say. Brushing our teeth, okay, that's what is there. Okay, so but the problem is the person don't want to actually do this Shuddhi Kriya, the action, you know, which has this, but they want the freedom that comes because of the action. Okay, they want the Mukti, but they don't want the Shuddhi. And the third one, which is the axis of Jidnyasa, which is what? Related to the Phala Prapti. And so the person wants the Phala, the Punya Phala, that person wants, but person doesn't want to create Punya. And how do you create Punya? Through Tapascharya, through focus. That is what the Dhyana is referred to. Anyway, so that's what I wanted to put this together, to bring it together here. And quickly, I want to begin with the question that I asked. But what if one does not have Shraddha? Even if you have a Shraddha, but if you are not focused and if you don't use the right tools, and there is an element of Daivam, which is to say all the appropriate background knowledge that you need, or you may not have selected the problem wisely, with that Shakya Prapti in mind. And what decides Shakya Prapti? The availability of the evidence, the availability of the science, the availability of technology at our disposal, which allows you to create wonderful thought experiments, and then implement the Tantra Yukti to turn those thought experiments into practical experiments, which allows us to validate, corroborate, falsify things. And the other axis is, if you don't use the method properly, okay, Krishna is saying what happens. If you don't use it, there is no happiness here, no happiness anywhere else, and you don't achieve your objective. You don't get the Siddhi. Bhagwan Patanjali Mahamuni, it says in a similar language, slightly different language, he says, Pratyaksha Anumana Agama Pramanani is the method, to basically get the knowledge. But if you don't follow this method, then what happens? Viparyayo Mithyajnana Atadrupa Pratishtam. If you don't follow this method properly, that's what that Shastra and why we must follow the method. You are guaranteed, okay, Viparyayo Mithyajnanam, you are guaranteed to reach false knowledge. Okay, that is the guarantee. But none of this discussion actually brings up the subject of what if one does not have a Shraddha. So I want to just pose that question to you for your meditation and contemplation. And on that, I would like to stop. Again, my greetings to you on the day of Mahashivratri. Om Namah Shivaya. Please write your comments. Let me know if this, what I am doing, you're finding this useful, this particular videos. Write down your questions. All that points I said in this video, do take into account when you write down your question. Okay, see if you have to do the research yourself. Is this a optimistic question? Is this a question stated with a Viveka Buddhi? If you have to work on it, and if it is your question, guys, I'm telling you, it's only you who is excited about it. Only you can work on it. Nobody else. I am not going to work on that question, and there is no point you asking somebody else to work on it. Okay, then otherwise this is all, you may be listening to this talk, but you have not understood. Maybe you need to go back and check, the quality of your buddhi, or what kind of mode it is in, sattva, raja, tamas, and so on. Okay, so please write your comments. Please share this video if you liked it, and I'll see you another time in another video. Namaskar.